In today's video, we're going to be discussing the suspension to Capitals forward Garnett Hatheway for the spitting incident the other night against the Anaheim Ducks. Bobby Ryan is going to be away from the Ottawa Senators for an extended period of time, and could we possibly see a blockbuster trade between the Maple Leafs and Penguins? Would that deal make sense? We'll discuss further coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of news topics to cover today, and we'll kick things off here with the Capitals. Garnett Hatheway has been suspended for 3 games for the incident the other night against the Anaheim Ducks, where he spit at Ducks defenseman Erik Gudbranson. As I mentioned the other day in the video to talk about the scenario when it first happened, it was really gross and disgusting, something that you really don't see. I don't think I could think of it kind of compare to would be the licking incident with Brad Marchand about a year or so ago when he was licking players on the ice. And clearly the NHL was not fond of the actions. We knew that he had a hearing coming up as of yesterday, but we didn't quite know exactly how everything that was going to go down. He had his hearing this morning, and they have announced that he's been suspended for 3 games. So clearly this is sending a message across the NHL that spitting at players is something that they don't want to see on the ice. Like I said, it's kind of gross, kind of disgusting, and we'll see what happens. Now, these two teams, the Ducks and the Capitals, I believe they play again in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. That should certainly be a very interesting game to watch. I certainly expect the rough physical play to continue. Things were getting quite chippy and late in the second period when this incident took place, and we'll be interested to see how all this goes down. I know Tom Wilson was on the bench at the time it was going down, and you could see on their bench he looked like he was kind of itching to get out there, but of course you leave the bench during play like that, you can get yourself in a lot of hot water. So thankfully for his case he didn't, but the camera kind of was panning over to him, and you could tell he wishes he was out there. So of course, as always, I want to know your thoughts on the suspension for Garnett Hatheway. Do you think 3 games is a fair number? I know I've heard a variety of people out there before the suspension came down saying 1 game, 2 games. I've even heard some say 5 or more. I guess it depends on how you feel about it. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we can continue discussing further. Now, as we know as well, the St. Louis Blues had a couple of veterans join the team here recently on professional tryouts. Not something you normally see mid-season, but they did have Jamie McGinn and Troy Brouwer both join the team on professional tryouts. Now, they did announce today that veteran forward Jamie McGinn has been released from that tryout, so he will not be getting a contract with the Blues. They still have Troy Brouwer with the team, though. They have about another 24 hours to decide if they're going to be signing or releasing him from that tryout. Now, the reviews on Brouwer so far have been fairly positive based on what I've seen out of St. Louis media. They said looks as though Brouwer's been in excellent shape and seems to be doing pretty well. Would not be shocking at all, especially with the injury to Tarasenko and the way their lineup is shaped, that they might consider signing him for the remainder of the deal on a 1-year veteran contract, probably prorated at $700K or something to that effect. Obviously not going to be for a lot of money. They don't have a ton of space, but I can certainly see them signing Brouwer. But we'll know for sure before the end of the day tomorrow if Brouwer is going to be signed or released by the Blues. Now, as I mentioned as well, Bobby Ryan of the Ottawa Senators is going to be away from the team for an extended period of time. It's not quite clear exactly. It's an indefinite leave through the Player Assistance Program. Now, there could be a variety of reasons, and due to the nature of it, of course, they're not going to be releasing any more details. The Senators put out a statement just indicating that Bobby's been a big part of their franchise, a big part of their community since he's been part of the team, and that they're fully supporting him as he deals with whatever the issues are. So clearly, because it's a personal thing, we're not going to find out anything further, and really I don't think we need to either, but there could be a wide variety of issues going on. It could be something to do with drugs or alcohol. That is possible. They certainly have a program to cover that. There's been a lot of talk and speculation online, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's having substance abuse issues. It could also be even something mental health related or something to that effect. As we know, Bobby Ryan has been through a lot in his life, more than you or I or most of us will probably ever encounter. He had an incredibly different kind of upbringing for sure. If you didn't see the little short documentary done on Bobby Ryan's life a number of years ago, I highly recommend you check it out. Might give you a whole new perspective on what he's been through. Essentially, his father beat his mother, had to go to jail, but they were on the run for a long time. He's under an assumed name. Bobby Ryan's not even his full legal name. He was born Bobby Stevenson. Obviously that changed his life for a long time. His mother recently passed away, who was, his everything in his life. He's gone through a lot in his career as well. On the ice, has several injuries, which has certainly impacted impacted his play, certainly can understand that he would be dealing with a lot. So certainly wish him the best. Obviously hope he gets through and battles whatever it is that his issues are. But there's really no point in speculating on what it might be. I've seen people online saying he's probably an alcoholic or a drug addict, and that's really not fair at all. I don't think that's fair to speculate. Don't necessarily think that's the case. He could be battling anything personal related. That's what that program is for. And I guess we'll see if and when he comes back and how things go. But hopefully he gets the help he needs to resolve whatever issues he's dealing with. Now, as we've talked about a lot here over the past little while, of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs continue to struggle. They started their road trip last night against the Vegas Golden Knights, and even though I think we can probably say the effort was better, they still ended up with another loss, 4-2 to the Golden Knights, which ultimately is their 6th consecutive loss. They now have a sub-500 record and are sinking further down the standings with every mounting loss that adds up here. So obviously things are not going well. We've talked a lot about the possibility of Mike Babcock being fired. We've talked about some potential trades that we've heard rumblings through the rumor mill and the NHL insiders, and a lot of that's still going on. Of course, last night through ESPN, there was some more talk and speculation about what type of deals that they feel that the Leafs should be looking to do between the coaching and the player personnel, and what they need to do to kind of get things turned around. And one of their analysts suggested a trade between the Pittsburgh Penguins and, of course, themselves with the Leafs. So I thought it was quite interesting to think about. So I wanted to present it to you here today just to see what your thoughts were, if you think this would make sense for both clubs. Of course, there was no inside sources indicating that they were actually talking about this deal, but it's been mentioned before by a number of NHL insiders that these two teams would make, good trade partners, and the deal certainly would make sense. Of course, the Leafs' issues are certainly with Tyson Barrie, the fact that he's not getting the job done, and a lot of that, in my opinion, is how he's being deployed. But either way, the Tyson Barrie experiment so far in Toronto is not working out. They really haven't been able to get solid backup goaltending. The youngster, Casimir Cascusio, certainly got thrown to the Wolves the other night against the Penguins in his debut in the NHL. Certainly wasn't the result he was hoping for his first NHL start. The team didn't really play well in front of them. It was a rather embarrassing loss, in my opinion. Certainly not the type that they're certainly capable of. So obviously there's lots of links here between these two teams. So you get Tyson Barrie, who likely could be moved. You got the fact that they need better depth in goaltending, somebody more reliable as a backup who can handle more games, give Frederik Andersen the proper rest, and be reliable in order to actually get a few wins from that position. Because right now, the backup goaltender for this season, regardless of who it's been, is yet to provide them with a W so far on the season. So if you take all that into effect, the trade would kind of basically go as is. You'd have Tyson Barrie obviously going to Pittsburgh. The Leafs would likely have to throw in maybe one of their young forwards that's been playing in the AHL, perhaps like a Jeremy Bracco, maybe even a third piece, whether it be a draft pick or maybe something else off the roster. It's going to really boil down to money, because as we know, the Leafs don't have a ton of wiggle room salary cap wise, and it probably would involve the Penguins doing some retention of salary as well, because Tyson Barrie's contract right now is pretty cheap, considering that Colorado is already still paying for half of it. So it's only $2.75 million cap hit for somebody who can be a very dynamic offensive D if he can get back to his old playing way. So if you have Barrie, maybe throw in like a Bracco, whether maybe a draft pick, or maybe even somebody else like a Nick Shore or something to that effect. But ultimately, you're looking at about 3 pieces from the Leafs to make this deal work in exchange for Justin Schultz, who, like Barrie, is a pending unrestricted free agent defenseman, has known in the past to put up some pretty decent offensive numbers, and a young goaltender who's 24 years old looking for more opportunity in Tristan Jarry. Now, of course, they got Matt Murray, who's the starter, proven winner, Stanley Cup winner. Then they've got Jarry and DeSmith, who's kind of both being held back a bit because of the fact that Matt Murray is quite young and an established starter with a lot of success early on. But of course, Tristan Jarry's cap hit would be very attractive to the Leafs as well. I believe it's only $675K. So if the Penguins retain some salary on Justin Schultz, you throw in him and Tristan Jarry together, send them over to the Leafs. They get basically a different type of player than Tyson Barrie, but somebody who can still be offensively minded. You've got Tristan Jarry, who can certainly take the load off Frederik Andersen. So from the Leafs perspective, I think that makes a lot of good sense. From the Penguins perspective, you get Tyson Barrie, who will likely fit in better with their systems compared to Toronto, be deployed a little bit different, likely come closer to putting up the old numbers that we're used to seeing from him. And at the same time, maybe they gather themselves another younger piece for the future who could possibly get some NHL action early on, if not for the future. I mean, Jeremy Bracco has done pretty well at the AHL level, hasn't been given much of an NHL opportunity yet. Perhaps a team like the Penguins, who's had a ton of success with their American Hockey League call-ups this year, could fit him into that lineup and get him a little bit of time and see how things go for him as well. Like I said, a lot of that's going to boil down to money. Right now, Justin Schultz's contract is substantially higher than Barrie, so the Penguins would have to retain on that end to try to even out the money. But between all the players going back and forth, to me, that's a deal that kind of makes sense. At this rate, they're both in a situation where they could benefit from a deal, and I think the deal kind of makes sense. So let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments, and we can continue the conversation. In the most recent edition of Insider Trading on TSN, there was also some more talk about the Calgary Flames. Now, I know yesterday we touched on the possibility of a Johnny Gaudreau trade. There's been a lot of chatter about the possibility of the Flames considering that, and Darren Dreger basically said that he doesn't feel like a big deal like that is imminent at all. Same thing with Bill Peters as head coach. Between Dreger and Bob McKenzie, neither one of them felt that he was in any kind of job danger at all, that Bill Peters was certainly secure for the time being, and I certainly would agree with that. I don't think it's a little bit soon to be considering a coaching change in Calgary. I mean, it's a whole different scenario than what we've got going on in Toronto. But at the same time, GM Brad Treliving is certainly looking to shake up the roster. Now, he didn't mention a big scenario like a trading of Johnny Gaudreau, but he did mention several other players who likely would be available that they'd like to make a deal with, and that includes a few forwards that we've mentioned before, like a Michael Frolik, for example, even a Mark Jankowski, who's really struggled mightily this year. He's certainly not producing at the shorthanded level like he has in the past, and he's not really producing at 5-on-5 either. So Jankowski is really having a hard go. So trading him might be difficult, but they certainly would like an upgrade in that area. Of course, Oliver Kylington's another name that came up. A player who would certainly like to have more of an opportunity. He's not getting as much of a role in Calgary that he would like or feel like he deserves or that he could take on. So it's another younger piece they could potentially include. Even defenseman Travis Hamonic was brought up. It was mentioned the fact that Hamonic and Treliving certainly had talks on a contract extension before the season began. Things did not go very well. Dreger indicated that Hamonic likely didn't like how those conversations went. Probably wasn't being offered anywhere near what he thought he was going to be getting on a new contract. So therefore, it's a scenario where they could use him as their own rental type of player and let things play out into next offseason, or they very well could consider trading him now to try to get some other pieces for another area of the team. But clearly this Flames team needs to be rejuvenated. Frustration keeps mounting. The interviews from Matthew Tkachuk certainly been telling and interesting. This team needs a change of some kind. I don't see it coming in the form of a coaching change, so a trade likely will be taking place, I would think, sometime soon for this group. Just a matter of who and when. Some of these players, though, they've been dangling for quite some time. I would imagine if a trade hasn't happened yet, it's likely because there's just not much interest out there in the trade market from some of these players. I'm sure at the same time, they must be kind of rotted a little bit. The James Neal's tearing it up, and the Oilers have 13 goals now, several coming on the power play, whereas Milan Lucic has no goals for the Flames so far. I know they expect Lucic to play a completely different role, and that's certainly all fine and dandy, but it'd be nice to be getting at least a little bit more offense out of him than they're getting currently. So let me know what you think about the Calgary Flames. Do you think a Johnny Gaudreau trade is something that likely would happen more so in the offseason? If they're going to make a smaller trade to try to shake things up now, let me know what your trade proposals would be, because a lot of these guys that they apparently are rumored and are willing to move certainly been out there for quite some time. We haven't seen anything happen, so it leads me to think that there's really not much interest in these players that are available. So again, as always, we'll know your thoughts and opinions and everything discussed here today, so let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.